I am turning on the record meeting feature. So you will, this meeting will be recorded tonight and it will be posted to the project website for future viewing. You'll also see on the screen in front of you a demographic survey in progress. These are questions that the City of Ann Arbor asks so that we can help understand who we are hearing from during our public engagement process. These questions are optional and anonymous, and there will also be the opportunity to respond to the questions at the end of the meeting today. I see that we have Councilmember Ramlawi has joined us tonight. Thank you for being here, Councilmember Ramlawi. If at any point you would like to make a brief comment, please raise your hand and staff can unmute you to allow you to speak. And I believe, Patty, if you could advance to the next slide, please. Our staff team this evening is Brian Steglitz, the Water Treatment Plant Services Manager, myself, Kayla Coleman, Community Engagement Specialist, and Patty McCall, the Associate Hydrogeologist from Tetra Tech. Next slide.
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, thank you, Brian. If you'd like to go ahead and jump in for the overview of the agenda, and welcome.
Thank you, Kayla, and sorry that I was having some technical difficulties, but it seems like I'm on right now. So what we're gonna be talking to you about today, we're gonna give you a little bit of background on this project, what precipitated it. We'll also be talking about how we identified the areas that we will be sampling, what other details there are associated with this work, how we're going to be working about getting in homes, the safety procedures that we're going to be following. We'll also talk about an agreement that we will be asking all of the residents who participate to sign and what's included in that. And we'll go through this in about the next 20 minutes. Patty McCall, our hydrogeologist from Tetra Tech, will be doing the majority of the technical part of the presentation. And then we'll wrap up and give folks an opportunity to ask any questions that they have. So with that, if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over back to Kayla to talk a little bit about how to work through the technology.
Thank you, Brian. So some of this was mentioned at the very start of the presentation. We'll review it once more for those who just joined us. So you will have the opportunity to speak tonight. If you'd like to ask questions, you have the option to raise your hand. So there is a raise hand feature that you will see on in the Zoom features. You press that to raise your hand, which will allow staff to unmute you, and then staff will lower your hand after your question or comment has been made. If you decide that you do not wish to ask a question anymore, you can press the raise hand feature again, and that will make the blue icon return to white, which will in effect lower your hand. And this is, if you are joining by computer, you'll have that option. By computer, you'll also have the option to submit a question in the Q&A window. So along the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a Q&A option. You can type into that window to submit a question, and there's a checkbox if you would like to submit your question anonymously. Otherwise, the name that you provided when you joined the meeting tonight will accompany the comment that you provide, that you submit. The questions will be viewable only to staff initially. Once they have been addressed, they will become publicly viewable to all meeting attendees. If you are joining us by phone tonight and you would like to ask a question, please press *9 to raise your hand. That will indicate to staff that you have a question, which will allow us to announce you by the last 3 digits of your phone number, allow you to speak, and then disable talking after you have asked your question or comment. Next slide. We will use the polling feature in Zoom tonight. And for those of you who joined early and were able to participate in the demographic questionnaire at the start of the meeting, you've already experienced this polling feature. Those same demographic questions will be available at the end of the meeting as well. In order to submit a question, to participate in a poll, you select your response and then choose the submit button. And then after you have participated in the poll, you can click the close button to make the poll go away so it's not taking up space on your screen so you can fully view the presentation being shown. If you are joining us by phone and you'd like to participate in one of the polls, you will use the raise hand feature, that's *9. You will be unmuted and you will be able to say the response to the poll aloud. This is not anonymous. Everyone in the meeting will be able to hear your response. Next slide. So in order to keep our meeting productive this evening, we have some meeting norms we would like to discuss and agree to. So we intend to start the meeting on time and end on time. We ask that you raise your hand to be recognized to talk. There will be one speaker at a time. Please move to a quiet area and silence any background sounds when speaking. Speak loud and clear so everyone can hear. Everyone will be provided a chance to speak before a repeat speaker. Be respectful of other ideas and perspectives, no finger pointing. Try to differentiate between I know, which are facts, and I think, which are opinions. Inappropriate written and/or verbal comment or language, including personal attacks and accusations, will result in the attendee being removed from the meeting. So we'd like to pause here briefly just to check in with all of you attendees and see if we have missed anything, if there's anything you would like to see added to the meeting norms or any concerns you have about the information that is presented here. And again, you can use that raise hand feature, or you can press *9 if you've joined by phone to let us know that you have something to add to the meeting norms. I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. And I'll turn it, I believe, back over to Brian.
Yes, thank you, Kayla. So a little bit about what got us here today. This project is put together at the request of council, and the really put together to ensure that the safety of the public by sampling flooded basements in residential homes in areas that potentially could be impacted by dioxane. So we identified the homes that were within the footprint of the dioxane plume where there was shallow groundwater, and Patty will talk a little bit about how we identified the perimeter of the areas, but that's how we selected the homes to participate in the program. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of definitions for some people who may be a little bit new to this, though I think it's been covered a lot lately in the media, but 1,4-dioxane is an industrial solvent. It's a contaminant. It's in groundwater. It's part of a site that was over on Wagner Road where a manufacturer of medical filters, Gelman Science, disposed of this chemical on their property. And it has since seeped into the groundwater and it's moving underneath parts of Ann Arbor. There were about 850,000 pounds of this chemical used in approximately 20 years. And over time, this contamination has been migrating from the Wagner Road site towards the Ann Arbor and the Huron River. Next slide, please. So there's a lot that's been being discussed about this topic in general now because there's recently been some new material released that's available for public comment, which is what the first bullet item on the slide is, this consent judgment. That is not something that we will be speaking about tonight. There will be other opportunities to comment on that, and we can provide you resources and direction where to go if you have input on that particular topic. We also won't be talking about Superfund, again, another topic that's associated with the future options for how this plume potentially could be remediated in the future. Again, another topic that we can direct you to other sources if you want to provide input on that. And also, this won't be discussing homes in Scioto or Ann Arbor Township where there may be residential customers who have been exposed or are near the plume. The topics tonight will be completely focused on very specific areas of Ann Arbor where is an intersection between the water table, which is the proximity of groundwater to basements, and concentrations of the dioxane plume, where those two intersect in very specific areas. And we sent out letters to all of the homes that have the potential to participate in this program. And I'm hoping that's how many of you heard about this, but we'll be asking a polling question about how you found out about this meeting, so we know if we were successful in reaching out to people. Next slide, please. So a good segue to our first poll, which is?
Yes. Sorry, just let me.
We're loading it up right now.
Yep.
Thank you for your patience.
Sorry about that delay. You should now see the poll on the screen in front of you. How did you hear about this meeting? So as Brian stated, we want to get a sense of whether or not our outreach was effective. So if you received an invitation or a letter mailed to you, please select that option. If it was word of mouth, a2gov.org project website, council member notification, or some other means of notification, please let us know. And if you are joining by phone and you would like to participate in the poll, please press *9 to raise your hand. I will unmute you and I can read these options again to allow you to provide your response. Looks like most of our attendees have participated. I do see that phone number 532 would like to participate. I have allowed you to speak. You should be able to press *6 to unmute yourself. Phone number 532, are you able to press *6 and unmute yourself? Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, and I'm happy to read these options for you. The question.
Yeah, I got the letter.
You got it. Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll add that to our polling tally.
Sure.
And I will go ahead and unmute you. Thank you, number 532. So I'll close polling now. And you should see the results now on your screen. So how did you hear about this meeting? It shows that 56%, it shows 9 people, but in fact it was actually 10. So that's a little higher percentage, received the invitation mailed. 1%, 6%, received council member notification. 6 people, 38%, received the communication through some other means. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so this is the start of the presentation. My name is Patty McCall, and I'm going to be walking through the next 15 slides or so. I want to first provide some background information about the project, about the Gelman plume in general. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. So just to orient everybody, this is 94, the split with 14 to the north and 94 to the south. This is the Gelman plume here that's outlined in yellow and sort of an orange color. The yellow signifies concentrations of 1,4-dioxane that are above 1 part per billion. And the orange color is everything that's greater than 85 parts per billion. And I want to give credit to the Washtenaw County Health Department. This is their map. And this is on their website if you want some further information. A couple of other things I want to draw your attention to. So the site is generally over here off of Wagner Road. All of the little dots that you see along here are monitoring wells. This box, this heavier red line, is what we're going to be talking about primarily tonight. And you can see there's not a lot of monitoring wells in this area. There's not a lot of investigation in this portion of the plume. This dashed line is the prohibition zone, where groundwater use is prohibited. So now we're going to take a look at this area in a little closer detail. So this is what we call the leading edge of the plumes. This is the front part of it, migrated the furthest. Just to orient you again, this is the 85 parts per billion in the orange color. Dexter Road and Jackson converging over to West Huron Street. So we're going to be looking at this area in greater detail. And I just want to reiterate again that we're looking at those areas that have the potential for shallow groundwater where we could have concentrations of 1,4-dioxane in the floodwaters in the basement. So that was our driver here. And again, so you can see that there's a couple of monitoring wells that Gelman has installed in this area. There are some monitoring wells that are down gradient here. These are not Gelman wells. These are just ones that we had access to that we sort of used to help us understand the geology and where the water is over here. Okay, so we are our purpose here is to target those homes that have flooded basements and then determine if the flooded water in their basements actually contain 1,4-dioxane. So in order to do that, we gathered some data from Gelman's consultant, essentially published information and some other sources, and we applied parameters to this to determine where those sampling areas may be. So the information we gathered, that first slide I showed you was from Washtenaw County Health Department. Oops, I'm sorry. Oops. Apparently it's not letting me go back. So I will run through that real quick. So we gathered information from the SIO Residents for Safe Water. They have documented their plume a little larger, the plume for Gelman a little bit larger than Washtenaw County Health Department. So we used their plume map. It's a little more conservative of an approach. We also looked at the monitoring wells from Gelman to evaluate the sort of the geology and the water in that area. Excuse me, we also looked at groundwater elevations in the area, and then we applied the parameters, 3 specific parameters to the area, and those include, one, we wanted groundwater that was within 25 feet of the ground surface. Excuse me. We also wanted to be within the plume boundary. And then we identified an 850-foot contour that I'll talk about more in greater detail in a few slides. So this is a depiction that was created actually by Gelman's consultant. It's an image that we imported and just sort of added some information to. This is what we call a plan view of a cross section. So just to orient you here, I know that the graphic is kind of bad because it's an image, but we just darkened this cross section line that we're most interested in. And starting at A, where this is near 94, where we've just split off from 14. This is Vets Park in this area. As you move to the east, you're at West Park here, and then basically at Main Street. So the next slide that I'm going to show you is the cross section. And what that means is if we were to cut along this line into the earth and look to the north, we would be able to see the geology and the water elevations. That's our next slide. Again, there's a lot of information on this slide, so I'm going to take a minute with it. So let me just orient you again. So we're over here near 94. Down here is basically where Main Street is. This is the surface topography. So it gives you an idea of where, as we go further to the east, we're getting closer to downtown. Our elevation is dropping. This yellow is, we've colored in what we call those granular soils. So those are those areas that are primarily sands and gravel. So you can think of these as areas where water has the ability to flow and have an aquifer there. Excuse me. So these are areas where we're looking for transporting that 1,4-dioxane. These black lines that you see in here are the monitoring wells that were used to create this cross section. And this blue line is essentially where the groundwater elevation exists. So you can see we have a pretty decent difference between the surface elevation and the groundwater on the west side. But as you get further to the east, you see that that's really pinched off. And there's not a lot of difference between the surface and the groundwater elevation. So these are the areas where we're starting to, this is where we're going to see water at the surface, groundwater at the surface. And again, this is, we're here at West Park and we've got Allen Creek Drain here. So that could be, we could be adding to Allen Creek Drain. So just, I want to go back here and look at this again. So what we're talking about transporting in the water is the 1,4-dioxane. So at Maple Road, these are, you can't see these because again, this is an image, but there's, when these wells were installed, they sampled several intervals. And I've just highlighted the highest concentration in each of these wells to give you an idea of what concentrations are out there. So at Maple Road, we're at about 1,700 parts per billion. This is the west side of Vets Park at about 680 parts per billion. And as we get to the east side, it drops to 78. But as you can see, all of these are connected in this yellow zone. And so this has the ability to migrate down toward West Park. Okay. This is a lot of information on it too, so I'm gonna take a couple of minutes with this. So now we've added a lot of information to our leading edge of the plume. Again, Dexter Road and Jackson are here and they converge to West Huron right through here and we run into Allen Creek Drain. We've added those surface features because those are typically low areas, right? Water collects in those low areas. And so that's an area of interest for us topographically. These blue areas are those areas we've identified, these areas A, B, and C, as potential areas where we could have flooded basements that we're interested in knowing whether or not they have 1,4-dioxane in them. Area C, as you can tell, is outside of our plume boundary. And this is because we know that there is some flooding on Chapin Street. And so we've added that in, even though it's outside the plume boundary. Another feature on here is this 850-foot contour line that runs kind of the squiggly line from north to south. We noticed early that this is sort of a divide. Things to the homes and the elevation to the west is generally higher, not as likely to be impacted as these areas to the east. And then I want to point out, the next slide is a cross section, and it's essentially going from West Liberty Street here to the north toward Miller to show you why these yellow areas in between were not part of the program. So as you can see, this is West Liberty Street here. This is just a cross section from Google Earth. Excuse me. And we're at about 850 foot of elevation near West Liberty Street. And as we get over to Miller, we're a little bit higher, but in these areas in between where we've got the drains like in West Park and in area B, we were much lower. There's about 40 feet of relief between these. And West Huron Street, as you can see, is a high point. So these are the target areas in cross-sectional view. Okay. So that's how we arrived at the areas. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the program specifically for the homeowners in this area. So as Brian mentioned, everybody should have received a letter in the mail with the survey from Tetra Tech asking them to complete the survey and mail it back. And the survey is just essentially, do you have a flooded basement? And if you've had a flooded basement in the past, when was it? So it gives us some temporal understanding of when flooding has occurred. The program then is, after we get that information, we've compiled this information. If your basement floods, then you contact Tetra Tech and we'll come out and complete the sampling. And then after the sampling, we get the data back, we will send you a report with the information. So prior to entering anybody's home, we will need an access agreement signed. Brian had mentioned this earlier. This is available on a2gov.org /basement sampling. You can read the details of it. It must be signed before we enter your home, and it basically allows us to complete the sampling and complete a visual survey, and that the results will be shared with the homeowner, the city, county health departments, and state agencies as necessary. So a little bit about COVID-19 protections before we talk about the, get into the details of the sampling. Tetra Tech has a very strict self-monitoring protocol that we follow, you know, besides going to people's homes. We follow them in our office, we follow them at our sites. So all staff will have face coverings, gloves, shoe protectors. They'll be brand new. They'll be donned at your house before we enter your house. And then they're discarded as soon as we leave. Any equipment that we bring in will be cleaned before entering into your home, and the equipment will be dedicated to staff. It will not be shared between them. Obviously, physical distancing will be practiced amongst the staff and also with the homeowners. And our goal is to limit the amount of time that we're actually in the house. We really want to complete as much paperwork as possible, and any discussions with the homeowner outside of the house to reduce the amount of time that we'll be inside. Excuse me. Okay, so just a little bit of information about what we will do. If you contact us with a wet basement after a rain event, we will mobilize to your home. Hopefully, depending on when you contact us, within 24 to 48 hours, we will need to complete a checklist. That's this document that's on the left. Basically, want to know what common household products are in the area. And part of COVID, we did a checklist to minimize the amount of time that we're going to be in the home. So we've listed by category commonly used household items, shampoos, laundry detergents, soaps, things like that, because 1,4-dioxane is in many of these products. We also want to, we'll also document the location of the basement sump, the type of flooring in the basement, any visible staining, anything else that the staff thinks is important to the collection. And if the homeowner allows, we will document with photographs of the sump area and sort of what the basement sampling area looks like. So then we'll collect the sample from the sump. We may collect a duplicate sample at your home just for quality control purposes. We have to take so many of them, so it may happen at your home. And the whole process should take no more than 30 minutes. So once we get the samples collected, we will submit them to the laboratory for a low-level detection analysis to provide us some resolution in the data. Once that takes about 2 weeks for the lab data to come back. Once we receive that, we will evaluate it and send a letter report to the homeowner and City of Ann Arbor personnel. So it should be about 4 weeks from the time that we collect the sample from your home. In the end of this program, we'll do a final report that's distributed to City of Ann Arbor, County Health Department, State of Michigan, specifically Eagle. That report will give some information not only about where we collected samples, what detections of 1,4-dioxane there may have been, but it will also include those homes that reported back to us that they didn't have flooded basements, because that's some good information to understand where people could be encountering groundwater in their homes. Okay, so post-sampling, is there a health risk if 1,4-dioxane is detected in your basement water? So the state of Michigan's department, I've referred to them as Eagle, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, their toxicologists have come up with a screening number, a screening level of 29 parts per billion. And what this means is they've calculated that 29 parts per billion, but below 29 parts per billion is not a health risk. If the concentration in your basement is above 29 parts per billion, further evaluation needs to be completed. And that will be done by Washtenaw County Health Department in conjunction with both Eagle and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So some expectations for the city and Tetra Tech and also the program participants. I just want to sort of summarize some of them. The PowerPoint and any discussion from this meeting and any questions and answers will be documented and put on the website, a2gov.org/basement sampling. The city and Tetra Tech will be responsive to scheduling the sampling that the homeowners request. The access agreements are available to the program participants at that website. And Tetra Tech and also the homeowners will be following the COVID protocols. So we will wear masks. We want the program participants also to wear masks when we're there. If any of my staff have symptoms, they will not be coming to your house. If they have a fever, they will not be at your house. And likewise, we hope that if you also have symptoms or a fever, would not ask us to sample and let us know that somebody's ill in the home. Also, we would hope that the homeowners participate and contact us to let us know when they have a flooded basement so we can collect that sample. And we will need the access agreement before we can enter your home. Okay, Kayla, I think we got another polling question.
Thank you, Patty. Yes, I'm going to launch another poll. And so based on the information that has been provided tonight, we would like to get a sense of whether or not you anticipate to participate in the basement sampling program. So you can select yes, no, I need more time to think about my decision, or I need more information before making a decision. And we'll also have the remainder of this meeting for question and answer time. But while we have the full audience still with us, we wanted to get some initial feedback on whether or not you are planning to participate in the program. And for our call-in participant, if you can press *9 to raise your hand, I can unmute you if you'd like to contribute to this poll as well. We'll just let that run for a few more minutes, or a minute or so. We have about half of our participants have contributed to the poll so far. And again, if you have called in and would like to participate, please press *9. And in order to keep us moving and on schedule, I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you should now see the results displayed on your screen. This shows that in response to the question, do you anticipate that you will participate in the basement sampling program? 3 people, or 30%, said yes. 2 people, or 20%, said no. 1 person, 10%, said I need more time to think about my decision. And 4 people, or 40%, said I need more information before making a decision. Thank you for participating in that poll. Next slide. So we're now moving into question and answer time for the remainder of the meeting tonight. And we have until 8 p.m., so almost a full hour for questions. And as a reminder, as you can see, for those who are connecting by computer, you can see the screen in front of you. You can contribute questions or comments in 2 ways, either by raising your hand, and you'll find that in the lower middle of your screen, you'll have a raise hand icon. It should be white right now. You can click it, it will turn blue, and that will show me that you would like to ask a question or make a comment. If you change your mind, just press the blue hand again, and it will return to white, and that lowers your hand. If you are connecting by computer, you'll also see the Q&A icon in the bottom middle of your screen. You can click that. It will open a Q&A window where you can type questions. I will see those questions come in and read them for staff to respond to. Once they've been answered, they will be viewable to the rest of the meeting participants as well. Those who are joining by phone who would like to ask a question, please press star 9. So we have our first question that has come in. The question is, since basements are porous, can dioxane enter a basement when there is no flooding from a high water table under or around basement walls? So I'll turn that over to Patty for a response. And Patty, just let me know if you need me to repeat any questions.
Sure, thank you. It is possible, but 1,4-dioxane does not volatilize easily, although it does volatilize. So the thickness of that floor is important, and this is part of the reason why that 29 parts per billion is a question mark whether or not it is a health risk, because the county and the state would have to take a look at your specific home for the construction, how thick the foundation is, if there's any cracks in it, things like that. So the short answer is it's possible that it could volatilize, but it's not as easy. It doesn't volatilize as easily as things like the gasoline in your car.
Thank you, Patty. Another question that has come in. A close-up of the red area did not include the monitoring wells from the overall map. The cross sections do not show the recent parts per billion readings. For example, several hundred parts per billion at MW-82S, the shallowest well closest to West Park. So that is a comment, but I'll ask Patty if there is anything that you would like to address there.
Yeah, I understand the comment. I'm trying to give a brief overview to give some context to the concentrations that could be coming down gradient.
Thank you. And another question, how many of the mailed surveys were returned? I don't think we have a number on that, nor are we, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any mailed surveys that have been returned. Patty, are you aware?
So, yes, I do know that we've gotten about 50 responses either in the mail or online. There were a couple of avenues to answer the survey. I think we've gotten about 50 responses and a handful, maybe 6, that were returned to sender. So we've got to figure those out.
Do you know the total of how many were mailed?
About 270.
Okay. Thank you, Patty. Another question, forgive me if this was covered, are the results going to be shared with the public as data points are collected?
As they're collected, I guess maybe, Brian, that's a question for you.
We will be sharing the results with the county and the state. Whether we do that, we'll be doing that after we compile all the information at the end of the sampling window. If there are some results that seem like they are concerning for one reason or another, we would be providing that information to the health department as soon as we receive the results.
Yes, thanks for saying that. I forgot to mention that.
Thank you, Brian. And I'm going to move to a question. I have a participant who has raised their hand to ask a question verbally, so we'll take that and then we'll return. I have a few more in the Q&A window as well. So Oleg, I see that you've raised your hand. I've marked you as allowed to speak. If you can unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Thank you for this presentation. If your initial sampling shows concentration higher than 29 parts per billion, then you said investigation by Michigan Department of Health will be needed. What does that entail and what are the consequences of that?
That's a question for Kristen, I think, if she's on. So the county health department is who will first be referred, and they probably will be doing some indoor air sampling, but I don't know, Kayla, if you can see if Kristen's on.
Kristen is on and her microphone should be enabled.
Hi there, this is Kristen Schweikhofer. I'm the Environmental Health Director with the Washtenaw County Health Department. So if The concentration, so there's a lot of assumptions that go into that calculation of 29 parts per billion. It kind of assumes that the entire basement floor is 100% porous and that there's water covering 100% of the basement floor. So what we'd want to do, as Patty had mentioned earlier, is really take an evaluation of the specific information at that home and take a look further into what the health risk is, because we want to make sure at the end of the day that the public health is protected. And all of that goes back to making sure that the concentration of dioxin in the air is below thresholds that we think would cause illness. It would cause a chronic illness, not an immediate health illness. So we certainly have time to do further investigation, and we would work closely with our state partners. If I don't have specifics in terms of what's like specific next steps would be taken, because I would also want to work with the potentially responsible party to see what, if any, actions that they would be willing to do and take on. But at the end of the day, we would likely do further water and or air analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. And there's another question that was in the chat window that I think is related. So I just want to read this one. If there's anything you have to add, let us know. If a health risk is shown, what options for mitigating it are there? Is there anything further to add, or did the prior question sufficiently address that?
Sure. So, well, it's a little bit of a different question. So typically, we would want to make sure that the water is not entering the home, and that's where we think the vapors would be coming from. In that case, it would be making sure that you've got a good footing drain system, or drain system, so that the water isn't entering the home. And then to contain vapors, we would want to put in something similar to a radon mitigation system, and that's typically how any vapor intrusion is taken care of. Those systems can run about $1,000 or $2,000, sometimes less, sometimes more. I think it's actually probably closer to 1,000 or less, and oftentimes just involves putting something over the sump pump system to then depressurize that and take any of those fumes and use a simple fan to blow them outside the home. Many homes in Ann Arbor already have radon mitigation systems, and so that would also reduce that risk.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. Next question. For testing, do you count as flooded basements only rain events, or also floods due to clogged drains?
So we were discussing rainwater. Brian, do you have any comment on that?
We were focusing on basement that gain water due to a flood event, because really we're talking about the risk of groundwater intrusion into the home, not due to plug drains in somebody's basement.
Thank you, Brian and Patty. Another question, my basement hasn't flooded. Can I still get sampling done?
Again, this is about groundwater intrusion into basements. So if there's no water in the basement, there's not really there's no opportunity to sample. So there has to be water in the sump in the basement, because that's going to be the source of our sample collection.
Thank you, Brian. We're going to take another raised hand question. So Gregory, I see that Gregory Bulby, I'm enabling your microphone, and you should now just need to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm Greg Bowlby. I live over on the west side. I can't quite see Gelman here, but I'm on First Sister Lake, so outside the target area. But a couple points have come up that I just wanted to ask some further questions on, and around the fact that we know that there's 1,4-dioxane in this groundwater in this area. So if we end up testing the water inside the basement, the hypothesis is that it will also have 1,4-dioxane in it, right?
Not necessarily. It's over that plume boundary, so
Okay.
That's what we're testing. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And then on the remediation side, it sounded like once we have some data, it would potentially go back to Gelman along the lines of, will they potentially pay for $1,000 radon gas discharge system of some sort, which is the cheap part? Do we know that all these houses actually have footing drain systems and sump pumps that are functional? Because that is a significantly different price tag when it comes to making a change.
Well, we're really just taking the first, thanks for your question, by the way. This is the first step of an investigation. This project was at the direction of council to evaluate a potential public health risk that council was concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
So the next steps are we really need to capture the data and see what we find before we can determine, how we would proceed with the next step. So I think at this point, it's difficult to answer those questions until we, get through this project over the next several months and have data, and then we can be talking about real facts that we know. And at this point, it's just sort of supposition.
Right. Okay. So what I'm actually leading up to my question with all of these questions, or my point might be that it might be difficult, and it seems like we've got maybe 10 or 15 people on this line, and there are over 200 homes potentially in the target area. It may be difficult to get homeowners to agree to have the city come in and potentially find a high level of 1,4-dioxane in their basement with no remediation plan in place. And if you can imagine somebody say, yeah, sure, come in, test this water on my floor, and then put it in some public forum and say we don't have a fix in place. I can just see, like, what does the real estate agent do with that? When radon gas first came out, it was the biggest scare in the world. And now we've got something, I'll use air quotes, similar to that, where there's no good fix on the boards. I wonder if homeowners may be discouraged of letting people in to come collect this data. I don't know if there's a better way of going about it, but I might think that with some, if we find this, we will do that type of further plan may be more convincing to those homeowners.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And if Brian or Patty want to respond at all, please chime in. Just in summary, it seems the concern is regarding the process here of sampling, allowing the samples to be collected without a process in place for remediation, or what the next steps would be, and who would handle those or who would pay for those.
I just want to make sure that you guys get the best data you can. And if we don't get many participants, that would be a shame.
Wonderful. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, my response is I thank you for the comment. I guess we'll have to see if we get feedback from folks who decide that they don't want to participate for that reason. And then we can, if that's the case, we'll have to reassess. We haven't received that feedback yet, to my knowledge. So at this point, I think it's going to be difficult. I think Kristen really addressed it well in her response earlier, without more information, it's really difficult to come up with a remedial solution. So, so I'm not sure that we're going to be able to come up with that solution until we actually have some data to work with and see what we find.
Thank you, Brian. Another question, or a rather comment that we have in the Q&A window, is regarding the levels of dioxane that are currently heading toward basements in this area. The comment is that people deserve to know the levels of dioxane in the area, and that might increase participation. Is there any comment from Brian or Patty that you'd like to add to that?
I don't really have a response to that. I think we identified, again, we're following council's direction, and the direction was to sample basements that were flooded that had the risk of getting groundwater intrusion with dioxane, and that's what the program is about, and that's what we're following through with.
Thank you, Brian. The next question. My house is 100 years old. It does not have a sump. I've had only one flood in 29 years after 4 inches of rain. Do I need to wait for the next flood or just moisture on the walls and floor? So could the sample be collected from the moisture on the walls and floor, I believe is the question here. And Cecile, if you need to clarify that at all, if I'm not reading it correctly, please raise your hand. But I'll turn that over for Patty and Brian.
Sure. So it would be difficult for us to get moisture off the wall. There's the potential to do it off the floor, but we wouldn't be able to use the screening level. We have to collect from the sump in order to be able to use the screening level. So I think if we ended up with a flooded basement at your home, it would be something that we would have to think about how we could potentially get a sample.
Thank you, Patty. That completes all of the questions that we have received so far. So all the questions in the Q&A have been answered. For those that are joining by computer, you should be able to open the Q&A window and see there'd be a tab that has questions that are answered. And you can see the question text in front of you the answers have been provided live, and those will be viewable for you later as part of the meeting recording if you want to refer back to any of the discussion tonight. If there are other questions, please continue submitting those in the Q&A, or if you would like to raise your hand, we can take more verbal questions as well.
While people are continuing to participate, do we have another slide with the address for the web?
We
link?
do, yeah.
Okay. So I guess I just want to make sure people have an opportunity. If you have questions and you don't feel comfortable answering them in this forum, or would like some more information from us as you consider participation in the program, here's 2 places where you can go. There's some information located on our website at a2gov.org/basement sampling, and you can send questions to basementsampling@tetratech.com, and we will respond to your questions, or if you have need some more information, we can work with you individually. And if there are any additional questions, I just want to also take the opportunity to thank those of you who listened tonight and have participated and asked a lot of good questions. We look forward to working through this program with you and hopefully getting the information to you that you're looking for. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We do have another hand raised. So Roger Ryle, I'm going to enable your microphone. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
It's more of a comment again. I really do think that the people down gradient need to know that there's 360 parts per billion heading towards West Park in the shallowest monitoring well that Gelman's put in near us there at MW 82S, right in the middle of the plume that Patty was showing. And I want to thank Patty for referring to CIROS and our safe water, because we probably have the best accumulated archive of all of the old sampling data and the current sampling data. That sampling data is only through June of this year. We still don't have the July data from Eagle, and let alone August. I mean, it's only halfway through September, so we don't have August yet either. So we have to wait for the state to update us on any recent sampling data in their full database. And I just want people to know that they can go to srsw.org and get some of this information that's not available anywhere else. So thank you.
Thank you, Roger. We appreciate that additional information. Another question has come in through the Q&A. The question is, my basement has flooded only when the sump pump failed. Can a sample be taken from the sump?
So I think, again, I have to reiterate what Brian said. It's for those basements that have flooded due to rainwater. That was the direction we were given.
Thank you, Patty.
Mm-hmm.
And then this question is regarding when the session will be available on the website. And I believe, I think we can do that within 1 week from now at the latest, if not sooner, possibly by early next week. So stay tuned for that. If you would like to be, I'm not certain whether Brian has started an email distribution list, but we typically keep one for most projects. So if you would like to have your email added to a distribution list on this topic, you can submit that in the Q&A, and I will keep that as private. I will not move the email addresses over to the answered column where they would be viewed publicly, but we can update you when the information is on the website if you provide that email address. Any other questions? We'll pause again for a minute or so here. And I'll reiterate, as Brian said, thank you all for joining this evening. We appreciate the thoughtful questions and comments that were made. And as Brian said as well, please do reach out if you would like to have any further discussion or a more private conversation if this open meeting forum was not comfortable for you to raise all of the questions that you had. Please let us know. I'm going to go ahead with that. Oh, we've got, sorry, one more question came in. Is there public information on the depth of groundwater at more specific locations within the neighborhoods? Is that anything that Patty might be able to respond to?
I would say the county health department, and also Roger had mentioned SIO residents, and the state has a repository of documents you can view. If you just Google Gelman and Eagle, you should find the repository. The county health department does have a lot of good information as well.
Thank you, Patty.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm seeing a couple email addresses coming in. Thank you for those who've submitted your email. We'll make sure to keep you informed when the information is available. I will now go ahead and I'll reopen the demographic questionnaire. This was available at the beginning of the meeting for those who joined early. This is optional and anonymous. This is something that the City of Ann Arbor includes as part of our standard public engagement process in order to get an idea of who is participating in our public meeting process so that we can get a better idea of who we're not reaching and promote more inclusive engagement. So if you've already filled this out, you don't need to do it twice. I'd prefer that you don't do it twice, but if you missed it at the beginning and have a moment now, please do. I'll leave that open. And with no further questions in the Q&A and no hands raised, I will turn it over to Brian if you'd like to close the meeting.
Again, thank you all for participating. We look forward to working with you over the next several months if you decide to participate in the program. And again, the two ways to get more information are included in our last slide. And I don't know if Patty doesn't have anything else to add. You know, you're free to move on for your evening. And thank you again for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ramlawi, did you have a comment? Councilmember Ramlawi, you should be able to, yep, unmute yourself. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to thank staff and the residents and others who came in tonight to talk about this and ask the questions and learn more about it. I know a lot of people probably left this with more questions than they came with, but I definitely think it was the right thing for the city to take this endeavor on and find out whether the residents want to engage in something like this and take it forward and have the county health department involved if there are cases where more investigation needs to be done. I know there's a lot of trepidation in this whole process, and but I just thought it was the responsible thing to do, and that's why myself and my colleague, Councilmember Smith, had brought it to council for consideration and ultimately support. I do have a question, though I apologize being late on this, is that a couple things, I guess. First, if levels come in at 29 parts per billion, the chance that happens, is that a push? How does that happen? Does that trigger further investigation or not if it lands right on 29?
So at 29, yeah, at 29, we would take the conservative approach and refer that to the county.
Okay, great. And now, early estimates were that half the residents would participate in this program. That was a consideration as to the cost of this program and the scope of it. Now that I've learned more about the process and what's required for sampling, we're learning that these need to be flooded basements with rainwater coming in through the ground for testing, which at this point to me sounds at a reasonable level to trigger sampling. But I'm just curious to know how many of these basements, and I don't think there's an answer right now for it, but how many of these basements flood occasionally enough for us to be able to gather any information using that type of requirement.
I will say that people that are sending back information, either in the letter format or sending emails, are providing information about, I've lived here 27 years and it's never flooded, or it flooded one time and this was the circumstance. So we are gathering information that helps us understand maybe where those flooded basements are truly in contact with groundwater more. I think part of that, final report where we provide some spatial information will include that information.
Did we get any kind of early indication that there's going to be sufficient number of basements to be tested? I mean, it sounds a little slightly discouraging if you were looking to see for samplings. It doesn't seem like there are that many basements that will qualify.
I don't know the number off the top of my head. I do know that we've had probably at least half were no sampling, or I'm sorry, no flooding recently. I can't say half of them were never flooded, but that's information, Councilman, that I can share with you. I could take a dive into the data and take a look at what we've got so far.
So the early indications was that this because of COVID, it got pushed back. Obviously, we're taking samplings much later in the year than we initially had planned to. And is there a sunset on this? Are we going to be taking samplings, going on for the next 12 months to 18 months, considering the qualifications for sampling, or is this just going to be done in the next 60 days?
I don't have that.
Well, I guess I can jump in on that. Without coming up with a firm decision right now, I think what we'd like to do is see who volunteers for participation and see how many of them we can get over the next few months. This is a good time of year to be doing this, so the summer would not have been a great time, though we did have a couple storms. But I anticipate that if folks have regular wet basements, those are the folks who are probably going to be wanting to participate. And I'm hoping that we can get them over the next few months. And if not, I think we can extend, you know, the,
Brian, we lost your audio.
am I back now?
Yep, you're back.
Okay.
We heard
I
that.
think we can be flexible on, you know, the sunset date based on the number of people who participate and the number of people we can actually get into their homes over the next few months and decide if it needs to be extended.
So that's
So-
up to staff's discretion at this point. It's not, there's no, in the resolution that was passed, there's no date set certain for termination of this sampling program.
Right, that's correct. I mean, I would anticipate that from a funding standpoint, it's planned to be done this fiscal year. So if it was going to extend past that for some reason, I think we would probably go back to council to get authorization to extend the funding into another fiscal year.
Okay, and for those listeners who are still with us, that would go through June 30th of 2021. The fiscal year begins July 1st. So that does give us plenty of time in that respect. But appreciate you being here, Brian, to answer that, and appreciate again the forum, and hopefully, I don't know, are there going to be another meeting set like this? I know there was, targets for getting back results and that kind of thing, but are we looking forward to another forum like this anytime soon?
We had not planned on having another public forum. If that was something that council thought was important, we could incorporate that into our work plan.
Okay.
Depending on what we find as results and whether we think that there's some information we want to discuss in a community forum again, I'd be happy to incorporate that into our future plans if so directed.
All right. Well, that's all I have. Yeah, for myself at least. There might be more questions coming in later, but again, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ramlawi. And I haven't seen any additional questions from other participants come in at this point in the Q&A, and I don't see any other hands raised. So I think we can move ahead to closing the meeting, and you are all welcome to enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you for taking time to be with us and to ask questions and contribute thoughtful comments to this discussion. We appreciate your time and enjoy your evening. All the best.